Thanks, Rob. My name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic.
Tim.
Grateful to be here sober, guys, and it's a pleasure coming out and talking about recovery, man. I love recovery. You know, it's done wonders for me. And it's amazing because before I got into recovery, I had like a certain perspective about myself. I had certain belief systems about myself that was born based upon certain things that happened growing up through my childhood and into high school and then college. And I always thought I was different. I always thought I wasn't a part of. I just didn't fit in. And I thought based upon the situations that I was in and things that I told myself, and I believed those lies, and that kept me out there, drinking and drugging for a while. And I was trying to chase that spiritual experience that you have for the first time when if you guys have ever drank or did drugs, a certain time, whether it was the first time, second time, or third time, you had that like aha moment, like this is what I'm missing, this is what I need. Like this is the first time I finally felt comfortable in my own skin, and I wasn't fearful of anyone judging me, and I felt like I was a part of. But then as life goes on, and I didn't realize what addiction was or alcoholism was, and the phenomenon of craving that I just needed more and more and more. And I kept trying to chase that spiritual experience that I had for the first time when I did drugs and alcohol. And as a result, I destroyed my life. I destroyed relationships and lost jobs and made terrible decisions based upon my alcoholism and drug addiction. So I'll qualify myself. My sobriety date is May 8th, 2016, which is coming up here in a couple weeks, which was Mother's Day of that year. You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Which is pretty cool. It's funny how things come full circle. So, real quick, I'll go into like my childhood, and then really quick, I'll go through the progression of the disease and how I got down here and I got into recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous. So, I was born in Long Island, New York. I grew up with a big Irish Catholic family. I'm one of 7. I'm the middle child, and I always thought I was the forgotten child. And I was adopted growing up because for some reason I have olive skin and all my siblings are freckled, and they look like Irish, kids and stuff. So when I don't really remember much from New York, but the first thing that kind of happened to me is that my parents decided to move from, when I was 7 years old, they moved from Long Island, New York to Northeast Philadelphia. And when they moved, they decided to homeschool all of us. So growing up, I didn't really socialize a lot. I didn't really have any friends besides my siblings. So like a normal day was I woke up, I would go to church with my mom, with my siblings. I was an altar boy, and I would come home and do schoolwork, and then I would go play baseball outside, and then I would, eat dinner and start it all over again. So my mom growing up was not only, she was my parent, but she was also my teacher. So it was really hard to differentiate when she was my teacher, when she was my parent, trying to, raise me. And all my siblings were homeschooled all the way up to the 8th grade. And once we finished the 8th grade, my parents sent us all off to high school. And when I got to high school, that was like the real world, kind of hit me all at once, and all those feelings and insecurities came up, and all those belief systems that I started to believe started happening. Like I didn't think I fit in. I was fearful. I was fear of people judging me, picking on me. I was also judging them as well. But that was when those feelings of emotions finally okay, this is what fear feels like. This is what ego feels like. The one thing I had going for me in high school was I was very good at sports, and I excelled at baseball. And that first year, that freshman year, was tough because I didn't fit in, or I felt like I didn't fit in, and people would always pick on me because I didn't come from one of those parish schools. So a lot of people would pick on me and say, "Oh, was your teacher hot in grade school?" like my mom, you know, like what am I supposed to do? Like, you know, everyone's joking about it, and that was the first time sarcasm was put into my life. Didn't know what that was. I use sarcasm today, you know, and but it's funny now. But back then, what I would do with those emotions, I would bottle them up inside, and they would eventually explode at one point in time, and I would usually take it out on my parents. So fast forward to senior year of high school. The first time I drank and smoked a little pot, my parents went away to go see my sister, who was away at college. It was like a parents' weekend, so they all left, and I had to stay home at the house because I had the SATs that weekend. So I took that opportunity to throw a party at my parents' house. It was a huge rager, and the first time I drank, the first time I smoked pot, it was the first time I felt like I belonged. And I felt like the popular kids, and I had all these friends for a night. And of course I drank a lot, and the next day I couldn't cover up my tracks, and my parents came home later on that night, and of course I got in trouble and I got caught. So I got a couple college baseball scholarship offers to a couple schools, and I decided to accept this one, which was all the way in Charlotte, North Carolina, because I picked that school. The reason why I picked that school in the first place because it was the furthest school away from my parents. And when I got there, I didn't have to answer who, what, when, where, and why anymore. You know, I didn't have to, you know, be home in time for curfew, all that stuff, and answer to my parents. I could I could do what I want when I wanted, and no one was going to stop me. And I had the college experience for 2 years. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about. You know, when you start drinking on Wednesday, it doesn't stop till Monday morning. And I got introduced to other drugs there as well, and I had fun. It was fun, like trying to chase that spiritual experience I had for the first time. And the first kind of big, or the second situation that happened, a drastic change happened when I in my second year there. I got into a huge fight with someone on a party bus, because we would go downtown to Charlotte, party, and come back to campus, and I got into a huge fight with someone on that bus, and it got back to the vice president of the school, and pretty much I was the one at fault for the incident, and they put me on college probation for a year, suspended me from athletics for a year, and I had to do 125 hours of community service on top of that. And like a good alcoholic and addict, I pointed the finger at everybody else, and I was the victim. Like, see, like, look what happened to me. Like, you know, I got a black eye. Like, it wasn't my fault. It was his fault. He started it, but you know, looking back at it now, it was completely my fault. But I played the victim card like a good addict alcoholic, even though I didn't realize it at that point in time. So I decided to leave that school and move back home with mom and dad, and go to a local school and finish out my collegiate athletic career. And when I moved from Charlotte back to Philadelphia, you hear this saying, like, you take yourself wherever you go. And that's what happened. I took myself with me when I went to I moved back home to my parents, and now I had to answer to who, what, when, where, and why anymore. And I didn't like that. And of course, I didn't stop. Like the phenomenon craving, I was always chasing more and more and more. And my parents kicked me out after 3 months, and I moved into an apartment with a couple of guys I met on the baseball team there. Within a month, they wanted to kick me out because I was just a party animal, and all I was trying to do was enjoy college, you know, and this is what we're supposed to do. Not real, you know, and you know, I drank more than the normal people, especially people I was hanging around. Like the friends that I met, they didn't want to hang out, they didn't want me around anymore. So, like the boy that cried wolf, I would ask my parents if I could move back in, give me another chance, I'll stop drinking excessively and stuff. And that didn't last. Another month I would get kicked out again, and I started working in the restaurant industry around this time. And if anyone's worked in the restaurant industry, it's kind of acceptable if you have like a drug problem or alcoholic problem to work there. And I loved that atmosphere because no one judged me, and I was around other alcoholics as well, and not only did I realize that I'm an alcoholic, but I'm also a workaholic. So I would wait tables in the morning, I would expedite work in the kitchen at nighttime, and then I would bounce till 2 a.m. in the morning, and then somehow wake up the next day and realize that I have no money left over from what I'd made the night before, because all my finances fed to my addiction. Every single time I couldn't pay my rent, I was always asking people for money, or I would do things to, make money, like steal from my employer. Like, that's what I would do, whatever it took. And when I realized, we'll talk about step one, admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And I didn't realize this then, but when you're in recovery and you start working with a sponsor, they explain to you, step one. And for me, my sponsor broke it down to me. Step powerlessness is broken down into 3 parts. One, we're powerless over consumption. Once we start, we can't stop. I understand that, okay? And looking back at my track record, I can agree with that. And the second part is the irrational thoughts become rational to me once I do pick up. And that's where the phenomenon of craving comes in. I will do things that are against my moral fiber to get what I want, whether that's the next lick, or whether that's the next drink, or whether that's the next pill. And I would do things like steal from my employer or steal from my friends, because I was insane. I would do irrational behavior based upon my alcoholism and addiction. So over the next 4 years, I'm in and out of my parents' house, moving in, asking them, if they can give me a second chance. And they would kick me out, and it was a revolving door over the next 4 years. And at one point in time, it was like towards the end of me asking them for help and asking them if I could come back. I had a house, and I rented a room from this guy who I met, and I lived there for about 1.5 years. And this is where my alcoholism really took off. And when I drink, I'm either a happy drunk or I like to get into fights. That's what happens with me. And I got into another fight at a party, and I got my face all broken in really bad, and I couldn't work for 3 weeks. And of course, when you're an active alcoholic and you have no finances, you're living paycheck to paycheck, I had to sell my car. And at this point in time, after I sold my car, it all went to drugs and alcohol and to rent. I ended up for the next 8 months walking back and forth to work. Walking back and forth, walking in the middle of the night for about 2 hours, and I would pick up a 6-pack from the bar that would meet halfway, and then ended up turning into a case. And it took me to a place where I had the shakes really, really bad in the morning, where I would line up shots of Jameson the night before, so then I would wake up and I would take those shots just to feel okay. And that went on for 8 months, and I went back to my parents' house. They bailed me out again, detoxed there for a little bit, and then I went into a halfway house, and I met another guy who ended up being a running mate of mine. We stayed at that halfway house for about a month, and then we decided it was a great idea, okay, because we both relapsed together, that we were going to live out of his car, we'll work, go to the gym in the morning, shower, keep our hygiene ready and stuff, make sure we're clean. And I did that for about 3 months with another dude in his car in a Honda Accord, okay? All right? And I thought that was okay, but that's insane. That's insanity. That's the stuff that we believe when we're under, the lash of alcoholism. So I eventually, ghosted that friend, and I went back to my parents' house, and then I stayed there for a night, and then I remember I went out with a bunch of other friends, and we were drinking all night, and I was doing cocaine. I was up all night, okay? And I decided it was a great idea to sneak back into my parents' house right before they would wake up, so they wouldn't notice I was gone after I just moved back in. And I walked into them watching Fox News, having coffee, and they're like, "Where have you been?" They knew where, they knew I left. So that was the first time that I was like, you know what? I need help. I need treatment. I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to stop. So they made a couple phone calls, and I decided to go to this place called Living Grin. And I got there, and this was about 2 days afterwards. I got there and I was doing the admissions with the admissions coordinator, and after about 2 hours, they bring my mom into the office with me, with the admissions coordinator, and they tell my mom and I that your son's not that bad, and we need the bed for somebody else. So in my mind, I'm like, see, like after 2 days, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not an addict. They're even telling us that like I don't have a problem, they need the bed for somebody else. I'm not that bad. My mom grew up with an alcoholic mother who had, my grandmother had 33 years of sobriety before she passed away, so she was in Al-Anon, and so she knew what she was dealing with. She was like, listen, if you want to stay in this house now, you need to go to AA meetings, you need to get a sponsor, you need to do all this stuff. And I was like, sure, whatever you need. I was very good at telling people what they wanted to hear, just so I could get my way, which was a roof over my head and food on the table for the time being. And when I first came to meetings and I first, saw everything, I saw the steps on the wall, and I saw the traditions, and everybody was happy, and I'm so uncomfortable, and I don't want to be there. Like some people are quartered. I was mommy ordered to AA. That's how it happened. So they started talking about God and powerlessness, and made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. As I understand Him, like I wanted nothing to do with that. I wanted nothing. So, of course, I couldn't stay sober because I wasn't willing to take the suggestions then. And over the next, I was still working at the restaurant, by the way, and eventually I left, lived in a crack house in Philadelphia for a couple months, taking the train back and forth to work, and I went back to my parents, and I was like, listen, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be homeless anymore. So they told me I needed to quit that job and get a different job and start going back to AA, and I was like, okay. And I got a job at the Homewood Suites of Hilton as a food and beverage manager, and I got a sponsor. And I told myself, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm actually going to give this a try. But I picked and choose what I wanted to do. I was involved in a home group. I had a coffee commitment. I started feeling better about myself, but I wasn't completely honest. I wasn't completely forthcoming with the fourth step, and I wasn't trying to make a conscious contact with God on a daily basis. So I remember it was a Friday, and the obsession took over me. The only thing I wanted to do was go down to the city and drink and get high. So instead of calling another alcoholic like they tell you when you want to drink, I called another alcoholic to cover my commitments so I can go down to the city and relapse. That's how cunning, baffling, and powerful this disease is. So I went on a 2-month run, lost everything. My finances were after I saved up a pretty good chunk of change, and my parents knew what was up again. So I gave them my debit card. I tried to detox on my own, and it was the Saturday before Mother's Day, and I tried 3 different times to get money out of my bank account. I had my buddy meet me, take me to the bank. The bank was closed on a Saturday. I go home, manipulate my parents, give me my debit card so I could pay my gym membership. And I went to the ATM. The ATM wouldn't let me withdraw any money. So I'm like, I did whatever it took to get my fix. So I decided to, after I couldn't withdraw money out of the ATM, I decided to go back home, manipulate my 2 little brothers to give me some money to buy Mom a joint Mother's Day gift. And I ended up overdosing on the couch. My brothers found me, my dad found me, and the EMT showed up, and they hit me with Narcan. And I just remember after they hit me with Narcan, I couldn't see anything. Everything was blurry, and I felt I was struggling. And the only voice I could recognize was my father's voice in the background. He said, keep breathing, Tim, keep breathing, Tim. And that was like my white light experience. When we talk about spiritual experience, like, God, if you get me out of this, I'll do whatever it takes. And I got out of that, had trouble breathing, I was spitting up blood, I went to the hospital, and the next day I woke up, and it was like 6 a.m., and there's that like orange sun peeping through the window, And the only thing I could think about was my mom making funeral plans for a dead son on Mother's Day. And that's the first time I felt hopeless, defeated, and I had no other options. So I told myself that I'm not going to listen to this thinking up here. I'm going to listen to other people so I can get my life back on track. So I took the suggestion. I went to a place called Miramont in Delco, Pennsylvania. Did 30 days there, and it was suggested to me to come to Florida to get from people, places, and things, and I was on board. Came down here, spent 30 days at a place called Ambrosia in West Palm, and once I got out of treatment, I went to my first AA meeting, and this guy said, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it stuck with me. I went up to him and asked him if he could be my sponsor. There was this guy named Bill, who had 19 years sober at that point in time, and at first he told me no. He wasn't sure if he could sponsor me because he had 14 other sponsees at the point in time, and he didn't know if he had enough time to give me. And I was like, okay, well, if you know someone who knows this stuff, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And 2 days later, I called him, and he said, yes, I'll be your sponsor. So when he went through step one with me, like I talked about powerlessness with you guys, my life was unmanageable. I knew that. I didn't know how to live. This is life or death. I realized that for the first time, that this is life or death. And as I was going through treatment, I started getting on my knees, and I started praying to God, and I started developing that conscious contact with God. And I can't tell you what God is, or what He isn't. But what I can tell you is I can feel Him. That's that God consciousness. And if you guys read in the back of the book about the spiritual experiences, it's going to talk to you about that God consciousness. Okay, and you know, when we got to step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood Him. And when people get to that step, I see often is that people don't know how to interpret that. And for me, how I interpret it is I'm going to turn my thoughts and my actions over to someone else. Okay, and that's praying to God, meditating in the morning, or talking to another alcoholic, my support network, my sponsor, about my thoughts. Okay, because when I start acting on my thoughts without bouncing them off of other people, I'm living in self-will, and I know what self-will looks like for me. It's going to end up on death's doorstep. So when I talk to Rob, or if I talk to my sober supports, and I bounce my ideas off of them, eventually I'm going to get what God's will is for me, because God, how I understand Him, speaks through other people. So as long as I continue to do that, I'm going to let God care for me. Big word in there, to the care of, in step 3. In step 4, making a fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I did one before I came down here, even though I didn't stay sober, but I wasn't forthcoming with it. And this time I put everything on paper. I had 50 pages of resentments. I was a very angry person. Had about 10 pages of fears, and I had my sex inventory in there as well. And it took me about 2 days with my sponsor to get through it. I felt like I did it to the best of my ability. Like they talk about in how it works, says Kathy, right? Red, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. I like to replace that word thorough with to the best of my ability. Okay, so I knew that I did it to the best of my ability, and did a 4 and 5 with my sponsor, and then step 6, man, those character defects, being able to get to the causes and the conditions of why I had those belief systems and I had those perspectives. And also, my sponsor also made me look at my assets, because I'm not a bad person, okay, when I'm not under the lash of alcoholism. I'm actually a good person at heart. We are all good people at heart, and under alcoholism, man, we make decisions that, we don't normally make when we're sober. So that was really eye-opening for me. And step 7, man, if I act on those character defects and stuff, I have to realize I can't beat myself up for it. I have to learn from them, learn from those lessons. Don't beat myself up, okay? Because a drink or a drug isn't going to make anything better, okay? Is what I realized. And then writing that list of amends, that was tough, because I owed a lot of people money, and I still owe a lot of people money, even though that I'm about to have 6 years sober. But it's continue to be willing to make those amends. I owe my former employer, the guy who own the restaurant, a lot of money, and I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting there. And then step 10, continue to take personal inventory when we were wrong, promptly admit it. For me, there's 3 different inventories. There's a spot on inventory, which is like if I said something slick and I owe an apology, spot on, I should do it right then and there. If I owe someone an amends, after I do a nightly inventory and look at my day, okay, then I'll make that amends to that person. And then an annual inventory, which I'm actually about to do pretty soon, is I've done this every year. I'm gonna go sit on the beach for about an hour and reflect on how this year has been. And I can tell you this, guys, honestly, man, since I got down here and I've stayed sober for these 6 years, man, every year has gotten better. It has gotten better, and I'm happy. Has there been struggles along the way? Have I got into a toxic relationship and got through that sober? Yeah. My job closed their doors down, but I was going to be okay because God had something else lined up for me. And it's pretty cool when you guys get out of here and you get with a sponsor, and hopefully you guys continue to remain sober. When you get to those year marks, man, being able to reflect on the year, it's like, yeah, was this year better than the last one? Hell yeah. And I can honestly say that every year has gotten better. And then step 11, continuing to have conscious contact with God on a daily basis and keep striving and searching, because I can't stay put with doing the same thing every day, the same prayers every day. I have to continue to look for spiritual progress and spiritual growth. And then step 12, which I will tie into my spiritual awakening. We talk about step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. The first part is a spiritual experience, and there's 2 different types. There's like that white light or the educational variety, which a lot of people get. The educational variety is going through the steps, is that your perspective and your thoughts change over time by going through these steps and taking these suggestions. And I've had that, but when my sponsor gave me my 1-year medallion 5 years ago, he asked me what my sobriety date was, and I told him it was May 8th, which was Mother's Day. And he told me, he's like, holy shit, Tim, the reason why I came down to Florida in the first place was to help my mother, who was dying of cancer, who was born on May 8th. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's God working in my life and putting the right people in my life at the right time. And it's pretty crazy. And I realized when I had like 3 years sober, Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson met on Mother's Day back in I forget the exact year, but they met on Mother's Day, which is pretty cool. And when I found both those things, or when I found out about both those things, it's like wow, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, you have revealed yourself, kind of. And I've heard different variations of people's experiences and spiritual experiences, and it's pretty cool when you stay plugged in and you don't leave before the miracle happens, guys. Like, it's a great way of life. It's amazing. And what I do today right now, which I'm actually going to be leaving that job pretty soon, because I'm going to business with my father pretty soon, which is exciting. But right now, currently, and I've been doing it for the last 4 years, I've been helping guys. I run 2 halfway houses, and it's pretty cool when you see guys like Rob come in and guys like Ryan over there come in, and their lives get better, and you see the change, and you see this working in other people's lives and not just your own. And that's where it's like, yeah, this is where